After this introduction, you will hear the video lecture of Richard Hiltner about humanity in evolution. And Richard is a homeopathic physician, so he is proficient in both theosophy and in human anatomy. And well, after this introduction, you will see the video. And then you will have the chance to ask your questions to him. And we think this lecture of Richard is very interesting because he shows, by means of many scientific facts, that the theosophical teachings on evolution match with the established biological facts. The present Darwinian evolution theory differs greatly with the theosophy, but the established facts do not differ. And as regards the technical biological details, the point is, of course, to recognize the general theosophical ideas and conclusions that may be drawn from these details. And these general ideas will be described in this introduction so that you may not lose your way in the details. What is the core issue? It is our human evolution during countless incarnations. We human beings were human beings since the birth of our planet. Although we were in those very early days a kind of proto-humans. Our thinking faculty was not yet awake, and our bodies were much more etheric than they are now. Now, what is our relation with the animal kingdom, with the animals? The cosmos is, you heard it today several ways, in essence a unity, a cooperation of beings. More developed beings have a duty towards less developed beings. And in the ancient past, we learn from theosophy, we humans have created the appropriate conditions for the manifestation of animals. In theosophy, this process is called emanation. Emanation means that the higher being creates the appropriate sphere or ambience in which the lower beings can find the means to exist. Take, for example, the re-embodiment of a planet. When the planetary being creates a sphere in which all the lower beings may manifest themselves. Consequently, we human beings were once the source and origin of all the animal stocks, in a period when we were still etheric men. What does emanation mean? It means that the higher being determines the general pattern, you may call the general characteristics, that will be followed by all the lower beings, although with 101 variations. So humanity laid the general pattern for all the animal stocks. And that's why there are also so many similarities between the basic pattern of our human body and the basic body pattern of animals. But there is also one big difference. Our human evolution is focused on the development of our thinking and not on physical top performances. We put our energy in our psychological development. And that is the reason why our body always remained primitive, in the sense of having general characteristics, without specializations. while in contrast, animal beings are apt to specialize. Monkeys climb, whales swim, quadrupedal animals run, etc. But the human body never specialized. Our hands, for instance, are universally built. We can do a lot of different things with our hands. But when we try to dig, or when we try to climb, or we can try to swim or to run, we are easily defeated by the specialists of the animal world, as you know. Well, if you study the fossils of a certain animal stock, you will always discover that the beings with the most universal bodies are the oldest ones, and that the specializations come later on in time. And consequently, man with this exceedingly universal body is more primitive and older, we say, than the animal stocks. And the result is that we humans have anatomical resemblances with primitive animal groups like the marsupials, the animals with the pouch, and the prosimians, animal groups that did not evolve far from the human stem. And Richard will go and give us some examples. Also, if we look to our embryonic development, and which is, according to Theosophy, is a short repetition of our evolutionary development, of our developmental history. So if we look to our embryonic development, we discover that we as embryo never pass a kind of quadrupedal or ape phase, as you would expect if men would descend from animals. There's a second important difference between men and all animals. We walk upright on two legs. Theosophy teaches that since we humans got physical bodies, we walk upright. So this is an old characteristic. And if you look to the embryological history and look when the typical human foot form appears, then we see that this typical form appears very early. In short, we do walk upright already for a long time in the history and have never climbed in trees and ran on four legs, at least not during this planetary period. Richard mentions ideas and facts that to our conviction must result in enormous changes in the scientific theories if people start investigating them. Before I finish this introduction, I wish to refer everyone who wishes to study the body aspect of human evolution and who wish to investigate the information you hear to the Theosophical books and articles on this subject. We have several on them in the book tables. And of course, you can also wait for the report of this symposium that will come out, and you can already order that report. Now, ladies and gentlemen, may I ask your attention for Richard Hiltner, first on video and next live, when we shall discuss this interesting subject, humanity in evolution.
Well, I would like to say thank you to all the wonderful people of the Netherlands, and especially to Herman Vermeulen and his wife Johanna, and for asking me to present this, I think, a very important subject, which hopefully all of you will have some benefit from. I also want to thank Truth Collins, who's to my right here, who is doing the videoing of this. Very, very much I thank you, Truth, for taking your time and effort. So the subject of this presentation is the humanity and evolution. And there are very few subjects that can stimulate the fires of controversy as that of evolution. The best set of 3 lectures that I personally heard on this subject was back in 1994-96, when I heard the topic of evolution and creation done by Will Thackara at the library of the Theosophical Society in Altadena, California. Although this article is dealing primarily with the theme of human evolution, one cannot avoid speaking also of the concept of creation, both human and otherwise. Perhaps it is best to sum up some of the essential propositions of the three Will Thacker talks before concentrating on the idea of human evolution. If my understanding is correct, Will stated that both creation and evolution are appropriate in the proper context. Namely, if creation is defined as more evolved, intelligent beings, or if one prefers a singular term, the collective demiurgus, or the third logos, sometimes called God, if you will, designing the manifested consciousness, life, substances from the earliest seeds of these beings, then we are on the right track, as opposed to creating something from nothing. As far as evolution is concerned, we'll explain very clearly and thoroughly a number of problems with the Darwinian theory. One of the most difficult gaps is between various organic substances, that is, combinations between hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen, and the formation of a simple cell. The formation of DNA, which is necessary for the replication of cells, has not been able to be done spontaneously through any laboratory experiment, and is unlikely, according to Dr. Robert Shapiro, professor of chemistry at New York University and author of Origins, A Skeptic's Guide to the Creation of Life on Earth, to have been assimilated from the rich prebiotic soup of early ages. Michael Denton, a researcher in biology and an author of Evolution, A Theory in Crisis, stated that the chance of 100 functional proteins occurring spontaneously in one place to form a viable cell is about 10 to the minus 2,000, or essentially impossible. This does not even take in consideration the need of nucleic acids, lipids, polysaccharides, etc. Some highlights include the fact that over the last 100 years there has still not been demonstrated finely graded missing links or fossils between major stocks or phyla of animals such as reptiles and birds, whales and land mammals, etc. The theory of punctuated equilibrium offered by Stephen Jay Gould and Eldridge basically proposes that the lack of documented evidence, the field of fissures between various classes and orders, is due to the supposition that these missing links were flourishing in some other parts of the earth which has not been discovered. Then they join the well-known animals. But of course, this is just another theory of missing links which has not been found. Will Thacker read an extremely important quote from Dr. Pierre-Paul Glacier, a zoologist and former president of the French Academy of Science, as stated in his book in 1973, Evolution of Living Organisms. Dr. Glacier related that to vary and evolve are two very different things. Evolution and metagenesis, or variation, are two independent phenomena. Mutation falls short of evolutionary variations, or evolution in the larger sense, that give rise to phyla, classes, orders, etc. We'll also mention similar thoughts by Dr. Paul Davies, an astrophysicist and author of the book Cosmic Blueprint, who says that the impression of design in the universe is overwhelming. Scientists are inching closer to the concept that the universe is pulsating with meaning and intention. There's much more that can be said about the excellent series of lectures by Will Thacker, and I strongly suggest that anyone who has not listened to them obtain the tapes or transcripts from the Altadena Theosophical Library. However, I would like to now move on to the more specific aspect of evolution, that is human. This article will concentrate on explicit structures which suggest that humans are more primitive than some other mammals and primates. I should define the term mammals or mammalia as a class of vertebrate animals of more than 4,000 species, including humans, distinguished by self-regulating body temperature, hair, and in females, mammae or breasts. Primates are also defined as an order of eutherian mammals, including man, apes, monkeys, lemurs, and living and extinct related forms that are all thought to be derived from the generalized arboreal ancestors, descended in turn from the shrew-like precursors during the Pliocene, and that are in general characterized by increasing perfection of binocular vision, specialization of the appendages for grasping and enlargement and differentiation of the brain. The book Man and Evolution by Godfrey D. Perucker, Godfrey D. Perucker was the head of the International Theosophical Headquarters in Point Loma, California from 1929 to 42. The main premises of this book is that human evolution primarily emphasizes the development of the mind, reflected physically in the central nervous system, that is, the brain and spinal cord. There's also reference to other anatomical structures which appear to be rather primitive. And when we use the word primitive, it's taken from the original meaning of Latin, meaning primos, meaning first, first in order. In other words, these anatomical configurations demonstrate evidence that the human is earlier in development in some key areas of anatomy than are the so-called earlier mammals or primates. Dr. D. Perucker specifically delineates 12 areas of interest. Almost all of these were taken from the book The Problem of Man's Ancestry by Dr. Frederick Wood Jones, professor of anatomy at the University of London. G.D. Perucker also emphasized that the close examination of the embryology and evolution can be quite enlightening on earlier humanity. The famous aphorism touted by a major proponent of the Darwinian evolution, Ernst Haeckel, in 1866, stated that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In other words, ontogeny is the biological development or course of the individual organism, whereas phylogeny is the evolution of a race or genetically related group of organisms. And that by studying the development of the embryo and the earliest beginnings of the individual animal or human, one is able to understand more closely the relationships between the earlier and primitive forms of the phyla or general group. I should define the embryonic period as the first 8 weeks of life after conception, especially during the 3rd and 8 weeks. The beginnings of all major external and internal structures are established during this period. Following this line of thought, it is logical to deduct that the earlier a structure occurs in the embryological formation, then the older or more primitive it is in the evolutionary scheme. For instance, Dr. Wood Jones remarks that the premaxilla, which is a bone above the lip on the face, is not present in the human. It is present in all mammals and primates, as a matter of fact. It is present even in extinct fossil fishes during some 200 or 300 million years ago. I should say dating that long ago. When examining the human embryo in the book, Color Atlas of Clinical Embryology by Moore et al., there is no mention by the authors of a premaxilla. However, Dr. Terence Swindler, Professor Emeritus of Anthropology at the University of Washington, declares that the premaxilla does exist early in the human embryo, but that it disappears early in embryonic development. Even if Dr. Swindler is correct, it still demonstrates that the premaxilla occurred very early in human evolution. The significance of this rather simple anatomical characteristic is emphasized by Dr. Swindler thusly. If humans lack pre-maxillary element, it meant that they differ radically from the other primates, and this feature could be used to separate Homo sapiens from other species. I would like to define the word phyla, which is the plural of phylum. It's a major taxonomic unit comprising organisms sharing fundamental pattern of organization and presumably a common descent. Now, to try to make that clear, let me give you an example of the Rhesus monkey. The Rhesus monkey shows the basic sequence of 7 levels. Kingdom is animal, phylum is second in line to chordata, which means it's very close to the general scheme of animals. The class is mammalia, order primates, family, and so forth and so on, you can read. So this gives you some idea how early the phylum is. So another point stressed by Dr. Woods-Jones is that the human foot, which he considered to be uniquely human, if one takes a close look at the human foot, one notices that the large toe is usually the longest toe. In some, the second toe is somewhat longer. But it is quite rare, if occurring at all, that the third toe is the longest. This third toe being longest is exactly the picture of all the other primates. As a matter of fact, the feet of all other primates look much more like hands. Observe the human hand. The third finger is the longest. Also, another important characteristic of the primate feet include especially the anthropoid, having more of a human appearance, that is, primates, is that the first digit, the large toe, is more like a thumb. Notice that it is able to move at 90-degree angles to the adjacent second toe. No human large toe could possibly do this. With these observations noted, it is quite logical to draw the conclusion expressed by Johann Blumenbach in 1791 that man only should be called bimonous, that is, two-handed, while lemurs, monkeys, and apes should be termed quadrumana, or four-handed. Nonetheless, since that time, the common anatomical thought was to say that humans are the only bipedal or 2-feet primates, and all the other primates are quadrupedal, which is incorrect by what was just stated. To stress the uniqueness of the human foot, one should return to the embryonic period to see by the 8th week, or the end of the embryonic period, the foot is fully observable to be the typical structure. The extremely early appearance of this feature again emphasizes the very primitive development, and at no time does the human foot have the appearance of the hand. Another significant anatomical feature of the leg and foot, which only occurs in humans, is the muscle called the peroneus tertius. This muscle originates from the distal 1/4 of the fibula, or in other words, one of the bones on the outer side of the leg, and inserts at the base of the 5th metatarsal, or the lateral outside aspect of the foot. This is a consequential muscle for being able to stand upright. Dr. Wood-Jones expressed that this human muscle has the same astonishing history as the human foot in its early development. Another example cited by Dr. Wood-Jones demonstrating the primitiveness of humans is the structure of the great artery aorta and its arch which exists the human heart. The specific branch arteries originating from the human aortic arch are seen in the most primitive mammal, the duck-billed platypus, which is from the very lowest order of mammals. No primate has this characteristic arch. This is confirmed by Dr. Alvin Davidson in his book Mammalian Anatomy, illustrating 5 different types of mammalian aortic arches. Dr. G. Brucker highlights that human evolution is primarily dealing with the mind. This is reflected by the relative size of the human brain. Primates, as a group, have the largest brains of all mammals. Stephen states that only man has encephalization which exceeds that of all animals. He is the only primate with an outstanding brain size. Indeed, Radinsky supported this claim when he pointed out that the human brain is some 3 to 5.5 times larger than might be expected in a higher primate with a human body weight. One can observe in a 4 to 6 week embryo that almost 25 to 30% consists of the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, illustrating the early development. Swindler expresses that the average size of the human brain is 1,430 cc's, whereas the average size of the gorilla, which has the largest brain capacity of all the apes, is 535 cc's, or about 1/3 of the human magnitude, and again the ape is much larger physically than the human, which makes it even smaller relatively speaking. The human hand and forearm display evidence of their primitiveness or earliness by illustrating their similarity to extinct reptiles. For example, skeletons, the Saurosternum and the Paleogama from the Permian and Lower Triassic periods, namely 180 million years ago, reveal many common characteristics or features of the human forearm and hand. Brucker points out that the transformists say that the human stock ran from the quadrupedal mammals to the monkeys and then to the apes. If so, there should be evidence that the upper extremity being used as a foot. No anatomist would ever say the upper extremity was ever used as a foot. I want to also make a definition of what an ape is. Apes can be divided into two groups: the gibbons, or lesser apes, and the great apes, the chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and in contrast to the prosimians, that is before the apes, the lemurs, the tarsiers, the lorises, and all but two specific monkeys, apes lack tails. Brucker points out that the transformists say that the human stock ran through quadrupedal mammals to monkeys and to apes. If so, there should be evidence of the early upper extremity being used as a foot or as feet. No anatomist would say that the upper extremity was ever used as a supporting limb or forearm. Wood-Jones expressed, "It is enough to study the hand and the forearm of a man to note the astonishing primitive arrangement of bones, muscles, and joints, to compare them with those of primitive type of a reptile, to contrast them with those of the quadrupedal mammal, to be certain that at no period has man or his ancestors supported the body weight upon the forelimb resting upon the surface of the earth." Also, the position of the human thumb and its prehensile opposability, that is again the ability of the thumb to cross the palm while rotating along a longitudinal axis, our grasping quality is considered better than, say, a gorilla or an anthropoid ape. For instance, it is quite difficult for a gorilla to pick up a pen. Dr. Wood-Jones states that the human appendix is very similar to various marsupials, and I will define what a marsupial is here. Marsupial is an order of mammals ranking just above the lowest order of Monotremata, that is the duckbill platypus, containing kangaroos, possums, and other related animals that, with few exceptions, have no placenta, have a pouch on the abdomen of the female containing the tits and serving to carry the young. Darius Swindler illustrates in his book, An Atlas on Primate Gross Anatomy, subtitled A Comparative Anatomy of the Baboon, Chimpanzee, and Man, that the appendix is present only in the lemur, the 4 anthropoid apes and man. The chimpanzee's appendix is much larger than it is in man and presents several coils. This is another bit of evidence revealing the extremely early development of humans. Dr. Wood-Jones continues with another case of primitive quality in humans is the muscle, the pectoris minor. This muscle originates in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th ribs and inserts on the coracoid process, which is backed by the scapula or collarbone about right here. In the anthropoid apes, it attaches in the part to the process, and in part to a ligament which passes down the humerus or the upper arm. In monkeys, it is still further down the ligament of the humerus. In many quadrupedal mammals, it is attached all together to the humerus. Dr. Wood-Jones therefore says that the coracoid process is the primitive attachment of this muscle, and man and some exceedingly primitive animals retain this type of insertion. Another instance of the earliness of human beginnings is the human tongue. It is not unlike that of the chimpanzee, but no monkey can show nearly so primitive of a mammalian tongue as that typical of man. The human kidney differs from the typical of the old world monkeys and the anthropoid apes in its internal structure, but it is matched by the kidneys of some of the lower New World monkeys. Again, in respect to the retention of remarkable primitive features, he continues, the human skull shows a great number of features in which the condition of the basal mammalian primitiveness is retained, and which offer a marked contrast to some of the parts in all monkeys and apes. In the base of the human skull and upon the sides of the brain case, the bones articulate in an order which is that characteristic of the primitive mammal. In these regions, the human skull shows a condition exactly like that of the lemurs. But the monkeys and anthropoid apes, with one exception, have lost this primitive arrangement and follow an utterly different plan. No monkey or anthropoid ape approaches near to man in the primitive simplicity of the nasal bones, the structure of the back of the orbit of the eye, the teeth. All these tell the same story, that the human skull is built upon remarkably primitive mammalian lines, which have been departed from in some degree by monkeys and apes. The human skull, especially in its variation, shows exactly the same condition. As for the muscles, man is wonderfully distinguished by retention of primitive features lost in the rest of the primates. Dr. Swimler confirms that the skeleton of mammals have evolved a number of specializations. However, the contemporary primates remain a rather conservative in their specializations of the skeleton. Another set of perceptions that feel worthy of note consist of the sequence of embryos and their relationship to the evolution of humans through the lower animal echelons. It appears to me that the embryo from 19 to 24 days has a strong resemblance to a primitive, extinct vertebrate fish dating 300 million years ago. Starting at 26 days, the embryo displays an obvious tail and what they call bronchial arcs, which are another names for gills. The upper and lower limb buds start to mature. The tail gradually diminishes and finally disappears by 56 days, or the end of the embryonic period. There's certainly a close similarity between the embryo at this tall tail stage, I should say, with the ancient amphibians. It is of interest that by the end of the 56th day, the tail is gone. This is very early in evolution. Also of interest is the fact that the external genitalia start to develop at 7 weeks but do not fully form until 12 weeks or 1 month after the embryonic period. What relationship could one draw to the early separation of the sexes to this fact, especially in reference to times of races? Another territory of research which closely approximates the periods given by H.P. Blavatsky, whose time periods differ from conventional thought, usually of a shorter time, is the fossil remnants of monkeys and apes. According to Dr. Swindler, the earliest anthropoid primates, or monkeys, were found in the late Oligocene epoch, approximately 35 to 24 million years ago. Most of the monkeys were found in the later period, the Miocene, or 24 to 5 million years ago. Blavatsky reveals that monkeys originated approximately 18 million years ago. Considering some of the variables in time periods, this could be in the ballpark with Dr. Swindler's estimations. Dr. Swindler points out that such studies have provided information on the degree of genetic variation or relationship among primates and have demonstrated that DNA of chimpanzees, gorillas, and human differs only by 2%. A more recent information says that it's actually 1%. This means that when the strands of DNA from any two of these animals are combined, about 98 or 99% of the bases match. Humans differ from orangutans by about 4% and from baboons by about 8%. So in conclusion, there's much evidence to show similarities between humans and especially the anthropoid apes. The question that has been placed is, which came first? A number of significant points have been raised demonstrating the primitive characteristic of humans which have been lost by monkeys and apes. There certainly are features which a human does not possess that we may term pithecoid or simian specializations. And finally, humans have developed some distinctly human specializations, some of which are dependent upon his upright posture, but some distinctly independent of this factor. If there is a consequential amount of evidence to make one have to consider that humans existed before the primates, is there any fossil remains of humans that could back up this theory? To my knowledge, the earliest human fossils are dated around 2.5 to 3 to 4 million years ago. So this does not give us a lot of information specifically that humans date longer than 4 million years ago, but still we have a lot of this other evidence about the primitive quality of many of the human features. Blavatsky says in The Secret Doctrine that the humans, that when they were in their second stage, or second race, if you will, procreated by budding or by sweating of cells into the environment, which developed into the mammals and other animals at that time. This, of course, backs up the fact that humans were more primitive and earlier than even the mammals and many of the other animals in general. So these are some bits of information that I hope will be helpful to enlighten people about some evidence that we have, but certainly we have room for more, which I feel reasonably optimistic will come in time. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, quite impressive to learn that we have a very primitive body. So that gives me more confidence if I am in the bathroom. And now we have the opportunity to ask Richard a few questions. I hope that the connection will work. Hi Richard, can you understand us?
Hello Herman, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
I hear you very well also.
Okay, good. Then I can ask the audience, do you have questions for Richard Hiltner about his presentation?
Good evening. You said that there's a proof that the forearm of a human creature diminished because of the fact that it is primitive. Isn't it possible that the evolution is the reason for this? Because it is used in another way that it was meant to be when it was before.
Well, the forearm and the hand are in many ways, again, very primitive from the beginning. The hand is specialized more for very fine motor skill, if you will, and which, again, apes are not able to pick up pins except, but it's compared to animals. Our arms and hands are very simple. They're not nearly as strong, they can't climb, etc., etc. They keep basic structure of movement, but very, very simple compared to other animals.
I think we suffer a little bit from an interruption in the connection, and we lose a little bit of your words, Richard. Can you repeat the last sentence?
Give it another.
Maybe that will work.
Okay, I'm going to use the headset here. You think that's any better?
Yes?
Okay. Again, the forearms and hands, as was said, are very primitive in the sense of being first, primos meaning first. They are very basic on movement compared to many of the other animals. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. But there is a certain amount of the specialization in that fingers are able to grasp very small objects compared to, say, the apes, which cannot pick up a pin. And so there is some of this which in some ways is more associated, if you will, with intellectual aspect and development of the mind and the central nervous system and that very fine detail. Most animals do not need to have this type of specialization. So that's clear. That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, over there.
Hello, Richard. I wondered why is it so that we cannot find any remains of human beings far more back than 3 or 4 billion years ago? Because, as you stated, I suppose we looked as a body probably the same way as we look now 10 or 20 million years ago.
Okay. Are you finished with your question?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, I hope?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you go through the secret doctrine and you study the evolution of the human race, before this human race, you might say the fourth, or the fifth root race rather, you had the fourth root race, which was the Atlanteans. The height of the Atlanteans was thought to be somewhere in the range of about 9 million years ago, something in this context. If they existed, again, the Atlantean continents went under the ocean, etc. And you can imagine what kind of changes have occurred over 9 million years under the ocean. You can imagine what happens in 100 years under the ocean, let alone 9 million. So many of these remnants of the human race were lost in that context. And it was said also that the humans at that time were very large and could be considered even giants compared to what we are now. And there is not a lot of information on this. I believe even in Alexandria they did find some skeletons that were rather large, which was one of the first areas in which the transference to the fifth race, or called the Aryan race, meaning the whole human race, occurred. But I think it's for that reason, because of time and under the ocean, etc., and the race before the Atlanteans, they hit their height. In fact, the separation of the human race, or the sexes, was thought to be about 18 million years ago, with the Lemurian, or the third root race. So, and then continents went in and above the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. So with all this happening, I think it's not hard to see that you will not find a lot of these remnants for good reason.
Thank you.
If I understand correctly, the human species emanates. Yes. So the animals can exist because they are emanated from the human species. When you look to the animals today, is the behavior of the human species is there a connection between the way we behave and the way that the animals can specify themselves or something like that? I hope it's clear.
I think I understand basically what you're saying, but I may not be clear, so please correct me if I say something that doesn't correctly answer your question. First, again, towards the end of the second root race, which is, as Herman was saying, was a time when the human race was more ethereal. Actually, the beginning of the second root race was more ethereal, or astral, if you will, and had much larger and very fine bodies, if I can use that word. They were actually, again, more astral, so we didn't have the solid body here. As towards the end of the second root race and the beginning of the third root race, the reproduction was done by, you might say, if it said sweat-born, I'll try to put that in words that may make more sense. The humans at that time were able to excrete, or secrete would be a better word, cells from their body, and that these could form into, you might even say, eggs, like the eggs we think of for animals that do have eggs. And that this time, the humans did not have enough control of their vital energy or prana or consciousness to keep these eggs from developing in their own direction instead of just human. Some of these would go into the animal kingdom, especially the mammals and so forth, and form into them. So I know this is probably very unique to certainly those that have not studied this concept, but this again goes back millions of years. We're talking about at least 18 million years ago, at least, probably much more than that. And then these vital entities would able to go in their own specialization and not be controlled by the human as they are now. There's no human cell that could possibly go into an animal at this point because we have very good control, et cetera, it's much more evolved. But at that time they were able to form a number of different animal kingdoms and so forth. So we have that influence of physically, at least, of the animals starting at that time. Now, going to the other part of your question, do we have an influence on them now? If I understand you correctly, we do have an influence on them through more subtle energies of consciousness, and yes, to some extent, the astral and higher energy and above the physical. We do influence them. As to how much, that's another question. I certainly do not know, but I do feel there is some influence. And again, they are, and we are related. And actually, we started an animal kingdom, which is a very, I think, unique idea, and perhaps shocking, I think, for probably many people if they do not understand this concept. And again, many of these primitive characteristics of the human that were pointed out by G.D. Barucher and specifically through the anatomy professor Wood-Jones to back up this information. So I hope I answered your question correctly.
Good. Richard, we have a small problem. We're running out of time and we have to leave the building within a little bit more than 10 minutes. Yeah, it is very sad and because your subject is very challenging for us because we are not specialized in it, but it has a very big important, let's say, proof for the Theosophical point of view, so that makes us involved in it. Yes?
Can I just say one thing to him for inspiration for me, because this is fascinating. And
Okay,
I want to also apply this to physics.
okay.
We use the secret doctrine
Yeah.
to perhaps discover some secrets in the realms of...
Okay, good. Well, one of the people in the audience, a gentleman, he was very much inspired by your talk and put him on track for also his physics interest and maybe study. So to show that there are some other information what go to the real basic of understanding how the manifestations are working. So that's a good thing. Okay, good, Richard. Thank you very much for your effort and all the troubles we have you solved and we have put through you through. But a special thanks to us as well for all the support he was giving. And we know now how to do it, so I think in the future we will make much more use of this technique. And it makes the world much smaller and we have a better connection between Theosophists as before. Thank you very much.
Sounds very fascinating.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Bye now.
Have a nice day. Bye. Wel thuis en een goede nacht.